My name is Nadia Sorensen, and the last sound I made as a Halcyon employee was my badge failing. You should know what that sounds like. It's small. The reader by the elevator had beeped green for me 4 years running. Every morning, same soft note. That morning it blinked red and made a flat little buzz, like a wrong answer on a game show. I swiped again. Red again. A contract guard I'd never seen before stood 2 feet away, hands folded, watching me the way you watch a stranger's dog. He watched me pack a box too. 1 box. I wrapped my coffee mug in a sheet of newspaper so it wouldn't crack. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I folded the newspaper over the mug, neat, corners tucked, the way my mother taught me to wrap a sandwich. Then I set it in the box and closed the flaps. That's the part I want you to hold on to. I folded the newspaper neatly. By 10 that morning, the whole company knew my name, because someone made sure it did. The email went out with a subject line in capital letters. Security remediation. 400 people on the CC line. And in the second paragraph, in plain black type, it named the analyst responsible for the exposure of 1.4 million patient records. That was me. That was supposed to be me. Grant Whitlock stood on the other side of the glass wall while I cleaned out my desk. Vice President of Information Security. 51 years old. Good suit. The kind of calm that costs money. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. He said 7 words through the open door, loud enough for the floor to hear. Analysts don't investigate themselves. Leave the laptop. 60 people on the open floor looked up. 60. I counted them later, in my head the way you count stairs in the dark. I set the laptop down. I picked up my box. I walked out past all of them, and not one said a word. Because what do you say to a person the company has already decided is guilty? That night I opened the risk ticket I'd filed 6 weeks before the breach. The one I'd flagged. The one they closed. Status still read the same 3 words it had read for 6 weeks. Closed. Won't fix. So I cleared the kitchen table, and I started rebuilding their entire network on it. I'm not going to show you how yet. That comes later, and when it comes on a screen in a room full of the exact people who watched me carry that box out. But I'll tell you now, so you keep watching for it. They didn't fire an analyst. They picked one. If you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it, this story is for you. Before I go on, if a story about being frozen out and clawing your way back to the truth is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe and do one small thing for me. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far a frozen out analyst's story can travel. Tell me where you are, then stay with me, because I need you to understand how ordinary it all looked right up until the moment it didn't. Let me start over calmer. Let me tell it the way it actually happened. For 4 years, I worked at Halcyon Health Data in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you've never heard of the company, that's the point. Nobody's supposed to hear of a clearinghouse. We were the pipe in the wall. When your hospital sent your test results to your insurance company, when a claim moved, when a prescription record crossed from one system to another, it very likely passed through a building like ours, quiet and beige, off a highway exit, with a logo nobody remembers. 1.4 million patients' records ran through our systems. Their names, their diagnoses, the dates their hearts had stopped and started again. All of it routing through machines that most of them would never know existed. My job was to read the fine print of the machines. I was a senior detection engineer. What that means in plain words is this. At 2 a.m, when everyone else was asleep, the systems were still talking to each other. And I was the person who read what they said, every login, every file that moved, every account that reached for a door it wasn't supposed to open. Most of it was nothing. A tired nurse mistyping a password, a backup job running late. But somewhere in the noise, once in a great while, there'd be a whisper that meant something. And my whole trade was learning to hear that one whisper in 10 million. I was good at it. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't, because false modesty is just another way of lying. and I'm done lying to make people comfortable. When I started at Halcyon, the security team drowned in alerts. 10,000 a day, and 9,900 of them meaningless. Nobody could work like that. You go numb. You start clicking acknowledge without reading, and the day a real one comes through, you acknowledge that too. And people get hurt. So I spent my first year rebuilding how the system decided what was worth waking a human for. I cut the noise in half, then in half again. By my third year, when an alert reached a person, it usually meant something. That's not a small thing. That's the difference between a team that catches the fire and a team that finds the ashes. I hardened the ingestion pipeline, which is the front door, the place where all that patient data first comes in. I tightened it. I put locks where there'd only been a doormat. I mentored the younger analysts in our Security Operations Center, the SOC, the room where the overnight watch happens. I taught a 26-year-old named Theo Nakamura how to tell a real intrusion from a nervous system twitching in its sleep. I was, by every measure they had, the reliable one. The one who stayed late without being asked. The one who never made it about herself. I learned all of that from a man named Saul Mercer. Saul was my mentor. Back when I was young and clumsy and thought security was about being clever. He was a forensics investigator, old school, the kind who'd worked cases before half the tools we use now existed. He taught me that being clever is worthless. What matters is being careful and being honest and being able to prove what you say. Anybody can have a theory, he used to tell me. You bring me the thing that happened. He retired years ago, moved out to a lake house, and I'm ashamed to say we drifted the way people do. His number sat in my phone, untouched, for a long time. I'll get to when I finally dialed it. But you need to understand the shape of my life first, because that's the part they were counting on. That's the leash they thought they had. I was raising a daughter alone. Josie, 15, smart in the way that scares you a little, sharp-tongued, already taller than me. Her father had been gone since she was 6, and I don't waste breath on him. It was the two of us. A house with a mortgage I could just barely carry, a tuition bill coming due because I'd gotten her into a school that was going to matter. The kind of place that turns a 15-year-old into someone with options. Every dollar of that rode on my salary. Every single one. When you're a single mother, your paycheck isn't money. It's the roof. It's the heat. It's the thing standing between your kid and a smaller life. Whitlock knew that. Whitlock knew exactly what a paycheck means to a woman like me. That's why he thought I'd fold. Now let me plant the thing that everything turns on, and I'll plant it the way it happened, which is to say, quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday, with nobody paying attention. 6 weeks before the breach, I found a problem. It wasn't dramatic. Real problems almost never are. I was reading through the service accounts, which are the accounts that machines use to talk to other machines. No person logs into them. They just run in the background, doing their jobs, moving data from here to there. Most of them are boring, and boring is good. But one of them wasn't boring. It was called SVC Data Sync. Its job was to synchronize records between two systems. A simple errand. But when I looked at what it was allowed to do, I stopped. It had domain admin escalation. Let me say that in plain language. This little errand runner, this account whose whole purpose was to copy files from one shelf to another, had the ability to become a master key. It could reach up and grant itself the highest level of access on the network. It didn't need that. Nothing about its actual job required it. Somebody, years back, had set it up lazy, given it the keys to the whole building because that was faster than figuring out which one door it needed. And then everyone forgot. It just sat there. A master key, taped under the doormat, humming to itself in the dark. So I did my job. I filed a risk ticket. I flagged it medium, not the top of the scale, because it hadn't been used wrong. It was just a loaded gun left on a table. I wrote up exactly what was wrong and exactly how to fix it. Scope it down, I said. Take away the escalation it doesn't need. It's a couple of hours of work, I recommended it plainly, no drama, and I sent it up the chain to Whitlock's team, because that path fell under his side of the house. They closed it 3 days later. I still remember the wording, because I've read it more times than I can count since. Closed, won't fix. And the reason? In the notes field. Business dependency. Reconfiguration risk outweighs theoretical exposure. Theoretical, I remember reading that word and feeling nothing much. A little tired, maybe. You file enough of these and get enough of them closed and you learn not to take it personally. I shrugged. I told myself I'd flagged it, it was on record, and if it ever mattered, the paper would speak for me. I actually thought that. I trusted the paper trail to speak for me. Remember that, because it's the exact place I was wrong, and it took me weeks of the worst part of my life to learn how wrong. I closed the tab. I moved on. 6 weeks went by. The breach hit on a weekend. They almost always do. Whoever's on the other side of these things knows that on a Saturday, the building's empty, and the humans are slow. It started Friday night and ran through Sunday, and by the time anyone was looking, 1.4 million records had walked out the door. Names, diagnoses, the whole private catalog of 1.5 million strangers, copied and gone. I found out the way everyone did, from a mass notification, my phone buzzing on the nightstand Sunday afternoon, while Josie and I were arguing pleasantly about what to watch. Major security incident. All hands. Report status Monday. I didn't panic. I want you to understand that. I felt something almost like relief, which sounds insane, but hear me out. This was my whole trade. A breach was the fire I'd trained 4 years to run toward. My first thought, my honest, immediate, stupid first thought, was, good, they'll need me. I knew those systems better than anyone alive. I already had a dozen theories about where I'd look first. I lay awake half of Sunday night, building the investigation in my head, deciding which logs to pull, which accounts to check. I was excited to help. That's the part that still makes my face hot. Monday morning, I got to the office early, coffee in hand, ready to work. My badge blinked red. I thought it was a glitch. Systems hiccup. I swiped again. Red. I stood there in the cold entryway with my coffee going lukewarm, and a woman from it I sort of knew came down and wouldn't meet my eyes and told me my access had been suspended. All of it. Not just the building, the systems. The CM, which is the big console where all the security data lives, the one place I could actually have investigated anything. Cut off. Pending review, she said. It's just protocol. Don't worry about it. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Because it was protocol. When there's a breach, you do sometimes freeze accounts. You reduce the number of hands touching things while you figure out what happened. I'd recommended that policy myself. So I stood there and told myself it was procedure, and it would sort itself out by lunch. And I even felt a little professional pride that they were following the playbook. I was being walled off from the one place I could have proven anything, and I was proud of them for the way they did it. That was Monday morning. By Monday at 10, the email went out. I was sitting at my desk. They'd let me sit at my desk. That's the thing. I was allowed to occupy the chair, but not touch the work. When it landed in 400 inboxes at once. Security remediation, all caps. I read it on my phone because my laptop was already restricted. And I got to the second paragraph, and I read the words, the analyst responsible for the exposure of 1.4 million patient records, and the floor of my stomach just dropped away. There was only one analyst it could mean. Everyone on that floor knew whose systems those were, whose name was on the ingestion pipeline. They didn't have to print my name. They'd printed my job. I stood up. I don't remember deciding to. And that's when I saw Whitlock behind the glass wall of the conference room, watching, waiting, like he'd timed it. Because he had. He'd let me sit down. He'd let the email hit. And then, with 60 people on the open floor already looking between their screens and me, he opened the door and said it. Analysts don't investigate themselves. Leave the laptop. I want to tell you I said something devastating. I didn't. My mouth was dry as paper. I looked at him, and I saw. This is the part I only understood later. I saw that he wasn't nervous. He was comfortable. A man telling a lie he's already decided is true. And around me 60 faces did the thing faces do, which is find something urgent to look at on their monitors. Because nobody wants to catch the eye of the person being drowned. I picked up my mug. I wrapped it in newspaper. I put it in a box with a stapler and a framed photo of Josie at 8 years old, gap-toothed, holding a fish. The contract guard walked me to the elevator. My badge, when I pressed it to the reader on the way out, blinked red one last time. And I remember thinking how strange it was that a small red light could feel like a verdict. Then I was standing in the parking lot in the flat morning sun, holding a box, unemployed, publicly named, and it still hadn't fully landed. That's the thing about a betrayal that comes wrapped in procedure. Every single step of it looks like the rules. It's only when you back up far enough to see all the steps in a row that you realize somebody drew the shape on purpose. The next part they did, through lawyers, which is how the powerful always do the cruelest things. 3 days after they walked me out, I got a call from a number I didn't know. HR. And beside her on the line, a lawyer from an outside firm. One of those voices that's been sanded smooth by saying terrible things gently. They had an offer. $95,000. Severance, a number chosen, I understood immediately, to be exactly large enough to be hard to refuse, and exactly small enough to insult me if I ever thought about it clearly. $95,000, and all I had to do was sign a letter. The letter accepted responsibility. My responsibility. It used the phrase, negligent configuration of access controls. It said, in careful legal English, that I, through my own carelessness, had left the door open that let 1.4 million people's private lives walk out. If I signed it, I got the money and a neutral reference, and I went away quietly. If I signed it, I put my own name on their crime, in ink, forever. I had 5 business days to decide. And here's what they were counting on. The lawyer mentioned, gently, so gently, that the company's board had scheduled an emergency incident review. 11 days out. Regulators would be watching. There'd be an external auditor. The implication hung in the air, unspoken, but perfectly clear. This is going to happen with you or without you. Take the money. Sign the paper. Let the grown-ups handle it. Don't make it worse for yourself. 5 days to decide. $95,000 I badly needed. A tuition bill. A mortgage. A daughter. I started calling other firms that week because I'm not a fool, because a single mother doesn't sit and wait. She moves. I had a strong URSUM and 4 years of good work, and I knew people. And every door I knocked on went quiet, in the same strange way. A recruiter who'd been eager Tuesday stopped answering by Thursday. A hiring manager at a company across town, a man who'd all but promised me a call, sent a 2-line email saying they decided to go another direction. 2 firms simply ghosted me mid-conversation. Warm one day, gone the next. It took me longer than it should have to understand what was happening, because I didn't want to. Halcyon was talking. Quietly, off the record, the way it's done, a phone call, a word at a conference. Between us, I wouldn't. They weren't just firing me. They were making sure the water closed over my head. A frozen-out analyst with a whisper campaign trailing her doesn't get hired. She gets forgotten. That was the plan. Take the $95,000 or take nothing, because we've made sure there's nothing else. And then one night, this is the night the something in me changed. Josie came into the kitchen while I was staring at that unsigned letter under the light. She'd heard me on the phone. She's 15, not 6. She knew the shape of what was happening even if she didn't have the words. She stood in the doorway in her socks, and she asked me, very quietly, trying to sound like it didn't matter, "Are we going to have to move? Are we going to have to move?" I told her no. I told her no in a voice that didn't shake, because that's a thing you learn to do. And after she went up to bed, I sat there with the letter and the $95,000, and I felt something turn over inside me. Slow and cold and final. They had done everything right, by their own logic. They'd cut my access, so I couldn't fight. They'd named me publicly, so the story was already told. They dangled money I needed, and made sure I had nowhere else to go. They had built a beautiful, airtight little box, and they'd put me in it, and they were waiting for me to be sensible and sign. They'd made exactly one mistake. They'd assumed a locked-out analyst was a diffused one. I couldn't sleep that night. I got up sometime after 2, the hour that had been mine for 4 years, the hour I did my best thinking. I made tea I didn't drink. And I started laying the 2 dates side by side in my head, the way Soul taught me. Not theories. The things that happened. The date of the breach, and the date 6 weeks before it. That I'd filed a ticket on a service account named SVC DataSync that had domain admin escalation it never needed. I'd been so buried in the shock and the shame and the money and Josie that I hadn't actually sat down and thought like an investigator. So I did. I stopped being a victim for 20 minutes and became what I actually am, which is the person who reads the whisper in the noise. The breach needed a way in and a way up. Getting into a system is one thing. Getting the master key once you're in is another. And it's the harder part, the part that stops most attacks. So the real question was never how they got a foot in the door. It was how they got the master key. How did whoever did this reach up and grant themselves the highest access on the network? The access you'd need to touch 1.4 million records and copy them out? They used an escalation path. And there was one escalation path sitting right there, loaded and unlocked, taped under the doormat, that I had personally documented 6 weeks earlier and been told, in writing, won't fix. SVC DataSync. I sat very still in my kitchen when that landed. Because if the breach ran through the exact path I'd flagged and they'd refused to close, then this was not negligence. Not mine. My ticket proved I'd found the hole and told them to seal it, and they'd said no. You cannot call a woman negligent for a door she begged you to lock. The paper said the opposite of what they were claiming. The paper made me the one person in the building who tried to stop this. But it went further than that, and this is where I got cold all the way through. To use that escalation path, to actually pull the trigger on SVC DataSync, you didn't just need to reach the account. The escalation had to be authorized. Approved, it required a standing administrative credential. One of a small handful of God-level accounts that could bless that jump from errand runner to master key. Not many people had one. And mine, whatever they were claiming, mine was already being throttled and watched, because I'm the one who set up half those controls. I worked it and reworked it, careful, the way Soul drilled into me, not letting myself run ahead of the evidence. And every time I came to the same shape. Whoever did this used the path I warned about. And to authorize that path, they needed a credential from a very short list. This wasn't a breach they'd discovered and traced back to a careless analyst. This was a crime that had run through a door I'd told them to lock, using a key from a ring only a few people carried. And then, when it came time to find someone to blame, they'd reached past everyone on that short list and pointed at the woman who'd filed the warning. I hadn't been caught in a scandal. I'd been chosen for one. Handpicked, because I was perfect for it. My name was on the systems, so the story wrote itself. And I was a single mother with a mortgage, so they figured I'd sign. Now, sitting there at 2 in the morning, I did the thing I always do, the reflex of my whole career. I thought, I'll document it. I'll write it all up, clean and airtight, the ticket, the dates, the credential logic, all of it, and I'll hand it to the review board, and the truth will speak for itself. The paper will speak for me. I actually started drafting it in my head, section headings and everything. And then I stopped. Because I heard Soul's voice. Not a memory exactly, more like the way you hear a person you learn from, standing at your shoulder. And what he'd have said was, "You already tried the paper. You filed the perfect ticket." It was true, and it was dated, and it was right. And they closed it with 3 words and buried it. And 6 weeks later, they used that same buried paper to hang you. A document is a thing that can be closed. Filed, lost, explained away by a man in a good suit who says the word theoretical. So at 7 the next morning, before I could talk myself out of it, I found a number in my phone I hadn't dialed in years. Saul Mercer. It rang 4 times and I almost hung up. And then there was his voice. Older. Gravel over the gravel. Saying my name like no time had passed at all. Nadia, it's early for you, isn't it? I told him everything. The badge, the email, the glass wall, the letter, the 95,000, the 2 dates, SVC data sync, all of it, in a rush. The way you can only talk to someone who taught you how to think. He didn't interrupt. That was always his gift, the listening. When I finally ran out of words, there was a long quiet on the line, and I could picture him out at that lake, looking at the water, turning it over. Then he asked me one question. The ticket you filed. The warning. Is it still there? Can they say you never sent it? It's there, I said. It's time-stamped. And I have my own copies. Good, he said. Then here's the only thing that matters, and I want you to write it down. I grabbed a pen. I actually grabbed a pen like I was 24 again in his office. A closed ticket is a piece of paper they can bury. You know that now. They already did it to you once. So don't hand them a document. You walk into that room, and you don't give them something to read. He paused, and I could hear him choosing the words. You make them watch it happen. Live, in front of everyone. You take that door you warned them about, and you open it right there on the screen, and you let the whole room see it swing. A paper they can close in a drawer. They can't close their own eyes. Make them watch it happen. Live, I sat in my kitchen with the pen in my hand and the light coming up gray in the window, and something in my chest that had been clenched for a week just opened, because that was it. That was the whole thing. They'd taken my access, my job, my name, my reference, my next job, my daughter's certainty about her own home. They'd taken everything a company can take from a person. But they'd left me the one thing that actually mattered, because they never imagined I'd use it. They'd left me the knowledge of how their machines worked. The breach they were blaming on me, I could rebuild it. From memory, from public documents, from the schema I knew better than the people still drawing salaries there. And the door they refused to close, SVC data sync, was almost certainly still open, because men like Whitlock don't fix the thing they're busy blaming on someone else. I could reproduce it. Not describe it. Not document it. Reproduce it. Build a copy of their network on my own kitchen table, on hardware that touched nothing of theirs, and then walk their own escalation path across it, live, and let the trigger light up in front of the same board that had come to bury me. And when it lit up, it wouldn't just prove I hadn't done it. It would show them the exact door and the exact key, and it would ask, out loud, in a room full of witnesses, whose key? That was the morning I stopped being a person things were happening to. I did not sign the letter. Instead, I wrote a different one, a formal rebuttal to Miriam Kessler, the chief compliance officer, the woman who'd be chairing the incident review. I was careful. I'd spent 4 years learning to be careful. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse anyone of anything I couldn't yet prove. I stated, plainly, that I rejected the characterization of negligence, that I had documented the vulnerability in question 6 weeks prior to the incident, that the ticket had been closed against my recommendation, and that I was requesting, formally under whistleblower protection, the opportunity to present findings directly to the review board. I did not tell her what the findings were. I did not tell her I was building anything. I only asked for the seat. Then I hit send, and I closed the laptop, and I looked around my kitchen, the table where Josie did her homework, where we ate, where I now had 11 days and a war to fight, and I started clearing it off. I had a plan that a week earlier would have sounded like something a desperate person tells herself in the dark. Build their network on this table. Segregated hardware, nothing connected to anything real, clean and isolated, so that no one could ever say I'd touched a production system, because that was a trap I could see coming from a mile off. Rebuild the pipeline from public schema documents and the 4 years living in my own head. Find the door, open it, rehearse until it ran clean and fast and undeniable. And then walk into that boardroom, the one they'd designed to be my execution, and ask, very politely, if I could share my screen. I want to be honest with you about how it felt in that first hour, because it wasn't triumphant. It was terrifying. I had no job and a countdown and a daughter upstairs who thought I had it handled. If I was wrong about even one piece of this, if they'd finally scoped that account down, if my memory of the pipeline was off, if the credential logic didn't hold, I'd have thrown away $95,000 and my last shred of standing to humiliate myself in front of the very people who already thought the worst of me. There is no $95,000 consolation prize for the woman who gambles and loses. But I kept hearing Soul. Don't hand them a document. Make them watch it happen. I moved the fruit bowl in the mail and Josie's chemistry homework off the table. I set down the first machine, and as I plugged it in, my personal phone lit up with a message from a number saved in it as Theo Nakamura, the 26-year-old I'd trained, the one still inside those walls, the one nobody thinks to watch. 3 words, sent quietly from a company he was risking his job by texting me from it all. They're still open. I sat down slowly in front of the dark screen, my own reflection looking back at me, and I understood that the door I needed was exactly where I'd left it, and that the 11 days between me and that room had just begun to burn. 11 days. That was the number I lived inside now. Not a deadline I'd been handed. A deadline I'd chosen. I didn't sign the letter. It stayed on the kitchen table where I'd first dropped it. $95,000 in one word. Negligent. Sitting under the fruit bowl like something I didn't want to touch with clean hands. Instead, I wrote to Miriam Kessler. Not a plea. Not a story about how unfair it all was. I've read enough of those to know they get skimmed and filed. I wrote 4 sentences. I said I was requesting a seat at the incident review. I said I would be presenting, not defending. I said I was asserting whistleblower protection under the company's own policy, section and paragraph. And I said I would need to share my screen. Then I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. You have to understand what that sentence did to my chest. Send. Such a small button. My whole standing, whatever was left of it, rode out of my hands and into a server I no longer had a badge to touch. Soul had told me to make them watch it happen. But first I had to build the thing they were going to watch, and I had 11 days, and a kitchen table, and a daughter upstairs who still thought I had this handled. So I built. I want to tell you exactly how, because the how is the whole point. I did not touch Halcyon's network. Not once. Not a login, not a ping, not a single packet. That was a trap, and I could see it from a mile off. The second I brushed production, Whitlock would have his real crime. And it would be mine. So I built from the outside. From memory. From 4 years of reading logs at 2 in the morning until the shape of that pipeline lived behind my eyes. I pulled the public schema documents. The health data interchange standards are public. The record formats, the routing logic, the way a clearinghouse hands a patient file from a hospital to an insurer and back, all of it published, all of it mine to read. And the rest of it, the private architecture, the way Halcyon had wired its own ingestion, I knew that cold. I'd hardened half of it myself. I rebuilt the ingestion pipeline on a machine that had never seen a corporate cable. Then a second machine for the directory. Then a third, wired only to the other 2, standing in for the domain the way a stunt double stands in for the star. My kitchen became a small gray copy of the thing that had fired me. Josie came down the second night for water and stopped in the doorway. 3 computers humming on the table where we ate dinner. Cables taped down so nobody tripped. Her mother in the blue glow at midnight. Mom, what is this? I almost lied. The old reflex. Keep her out of it. Keep her safe. Keep the fear upstairs where it couldn't reach her. But she's 15, not 8, and she'd earned better. I'm building a copy of my old work, I said, so I can show some people something they don't want to see. She looked at the machines. She looked at me. Is it going to work? I don't know yet. She nodded slowly, like that was a fair answer, filled her glass, and on the way back to the stairs she said, "You always find the thing." And she was gone. I sat there and let that carry me another 2 hours. Then Theo confirmed the piece I needed most. He didn't text again, too risky, and I told him to go quiet. He called from a parking lot, engine off, voice low. He'd checked the way only someone still inside could check. 6 weeks I'd warned them. A weekend the breach had run. An SVC data sync, the service account with domain admin escalation it never needed. The one I'd filed the ticket on, the one they'd closed, won't fix. Business dependency. Still open. Still unscoped. Still carrying God-level reach it had no business carrying. They'd blamed me for the breach and never once fixed the door the breach walked through. Because they weren't afraid of the door. They were afraid of me pointing at it. Nadia, Theo said, and I could hear how young he was and how scared. If I pull the original ticket screenshots and the sandbox exports before anybody thinks to purge them, is that going to end me? Don't touch anything you're not already cleared to touch, I said. But if it's sitting in a system you have every right to open and you happen to save a copy, that's just good record keeping. A pause. Good record keeping, he repeated. Then, quieter. It's the right thing. Even if it costs me. I know that. Kids like Theo are why the whole thing is worth it. I told him so. He laughed, embarrassed, and hung up before either of us could get soft about it. Cycle 1 held. But the network is a small town, and small towns talk. On the 6th day, my personal phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. A friend of a friend. Still on the inside, doing me a kindness. It had flagged something. My decommissioned VPN certificate, the one that should have died the morning my badge went red, had blinked online for a few seconds. Not from me. A cached handshake, some auto-reconnect on an old laptop I'd already wiped. A ghost of a credential twitching once before it died for good. Meaningless, but inside those walls it was oxygen. Derek Pryor ran it straight to Whitlock. I heard the words later, third hand, and they were exactly the words I'd have written for him. She's exfiltrating. She's still in the network. I told you she took files. Derek, 34, handed my projects with a bow on them, handed the word responsible like it was a promotion. He wanted my seat, and now he thought he could earn it by playing Bloodhound. And for about a day, in that building, the story got legs. The frozen-out analyst, still burrowing in, proving her own guilt. I'll be honest, for about a day it scared me too. Because innocence doesn't matter if the accusation gets loud enough first. I'd already lived that once. But here's the thing about building it all in your own kitchen from public paper. There was nothing to find. They could subpoena every machine I owned, and every one would tell the same story. Public documents, my own memory. Not one bite of Halcyon's. The VPN ghost was a dead cert waving from the grave, and the moment it actually looked at the timestamp against the traffic, it was nothing. No session. No transfer. A twitch. And the relief came from the direction I least expected. The external forensic auditor. Regulators don't let a company investigate its own breach and grade its own paper. There was an outside forensics firm on this, contractually, and their investigator wanted something Halcyon very much did not want to give her. She wanted the original analyst in the room, the person who'd built the detection. The person she'd found this, because auditors find things, filed a risk ticket on the exact account family the breach appeared to have used. Miriam Kessler had been planning to keep me out. A clean, defensible narrative for the regulators, that's all Miriam wanted. And I was the opposite of clean and defensible. But the auditor pushed, and Kessler was more afraid of the auditor's report than of me. The email came on the 8th day. 2 lines. My request to present at the incident review was granted. 15 minutes. I would be permitted to share my screen. 15 minutes. I read it 4 times. They thought they were giving me just enough rope. I only needed 90 seconds. That's cycle 2. I rehearsed. God, did I rehearse. I ran the reproduction start to finish until my hands knew it without me. Low privilege account. Pivot to SVC data sync. Trigger the escalation. Watch the exfil path open on the screen like a door I'd drawn a map to 6 weeks before anyone kicked it in. 90 seconds. Clean. And then the part that mattered. The second window. The real breaches authorization record. Sitting beside my live one so the room could see with their own eyes that the two were the same shape. I rehearsed the words too. Soul had taught me that. The demo does the work, but the one sentence you say while it runs, that's the nail. I said mine to my dark reflection at 2 in the morning until it stopped shaking. And the whole time, I let Whitlock believe I'd fold. I didn't answer the Severance Council's follow-up. I let the 5 business days lapse with the letter unsigned and silent, which to a man like Whitlock reads as a woman who's given up, not a woman who's loading. Derek reported I'd gone quiet. Whitlock, I later learned, told the CTO I was likely a no-show, probably lawyering up for a payout. Good. Let the room be exactly as unprepared as I needed it. You, watching this, you already know what's walking into that room. The room didn't. That gap, that was the only weapon I had, and I carried it in with both hands. The review was on the 11th day, at 10 in the morning, in the glass conference room on the 4th floor. The same floor. I want you to sit with that. The same floor where Whitlock had stood at the wall and told me analysts don't investigate themselves. They gave me a visitor badge at the desk. It beeped red the first time. The contract guard had to wave it again. Even the building wanted me gone. I walked in with a laptop bag and one machine, the sandbox, folded down to a single unit I could plug into their projector. 8 people at the long table. 2 board members on a screen, remote, the CTO. Gray suit, gray face. Miriam Kessler at the head, chairing. Her narrative in a folder in front of her. The auditor, I'll call her the auditor, she's the only one in that room I'd buy a coffee, off to the side with her own notes. And Whitlock. 51. Relaxed, jacket open, the easy posture of a man who thinks the hard part is behind him. He actually smiled at me. Nadia, glad you came. This'll help everyone get closure. Closure. I said good morning and set up my machine. Kessler ran the preamble. The breach, the exposure, 1.4 million patient records, the remediation timeline, the regulatory filing. The word negligent appeared twice in her first 3 minutes, attached each time to a configuration, and the configuration each time attached, softly, to me. The CTO nodded along. Derek Pryor sat 2 seats down from Whitlock with a legal pad. Here is the new owner of my old work, ready to answer for it. Then Kessler, gatekeeping to the last, said, Ms. Sorensen has asked to present. Briefly, the board is granted 15 minutes. A glance at me that said, and not 1 second more. I plugged into the projector. My sandbox came up on the big wall. Thank you, I said. I'm not going to read you a document. You've all read documents. I'm going to show you the breach, live on a replica I built at my kitchen table from public schema documents and my own memory of the pipeline I spent 4 years hardening. Nothing on this machine has ever touched Halcyon's network. The auditor can inspect it after. She's welcome to. The auditor's pen stopped moving. She was watching now. Step 1, I said. I log in as the lowest privilege account in this environment, a read-only analyst. The kind of account a contractor gets on day 1. I typed. The account came up on the wall, its permissions listed, all of them small. This account can't do anything interesting. It can look. It can't touch. Everyone agree? A couple of nods. Whitlock's smile had gone flat and patient. Step 2. I pivot to a service account. This one. I brought up SVC Data Sync. Its name filled the wall. A data sync account. Boring, moves records between systems on a schedule. Except, I pulled its permissions. And there it was, the thing I'd filed on 6 weeks before the breach, blooming on the wall for 8 people to see. Except it carries domain admin escalation. God-level reach. For a job that only ever needed to copy files from one folder to another. The CTO shifted in his seat. Step 3. My hands were steady. 90 seconds, and I was 40 in. I used this boring accounts escalation to walk straight up to the top, watch the path, and I ran it. On the wall, in front of the board that came to condemn me, the exact exfiltration path lit up. Low account to service account to domain admin to the record store. The door opening. 1.4 million patient files sitting behind it, in my replica, in the shape of the real thing. It took 11 seconds to open once you knew the account was there. 11 seconds. I let it sit on the wall. That's the breach, I said. That's how 1.4 million records walked out on a weekend. Not through a firewall. Not through some genius 0-day. Through a service account with more power than it needed. That I filed a ticket on. That this company closed as won't fix. I turned from the screen and looked at them. Dry as I could make it. I didn't pull a log. Watch it happen again. And watch whose name the escalation borrows. That's when Whitlock moved. Stop, he was half out of his chair. This is reckless. She's running an attack against production. Live, in a compliance review. Kill her connection. Now, he pointed at the wall like it was on fire. You're all watching a former employee breach us in real time. This is exactly the behavior. It cut her off. And it lead by the door reached for the network switch. For one bad second, the whole thing hung there. Whitlock's voice was loud and certain, and it filled the room. And loud certainty is a real force. I've watched it win before. The auditor stood up. Don't touch that switch, she said. Quiet, but it stopped the room. She walked to my machine, turned it over in her hands, checked the ports. One cable, to the projector. No network. This unit is not connected to anything. There is no production traffic here. There is no attack. There is a self-contained replica. She looked at Whitlock, and there was something almost curious in it. Why would you assume a demonstration is a live breach unless you already knew the demonstration would be accurate? Whitlock sat down. Slowly, he didn't have an answer to that, and he was smart enough not to try one. Thank you, I said to her. To the room, he's right about one thing. You shouldn't take my word for any of this. So don't. Let me put the real thing next to it. Second window. This is the part I'd rehearsed until my hands stopped shaking. I brought up the real breach's authorization record, the piece Theo had preserved before anyone thought to purge it, the piece the auditor already had a copy of in her own file, so nobody could say it was mine, and mine alone. I put it on the wall beside my live one. Same path. Same account. Same escalation. Line for line. The door I just opened in my kitchen, and the door someone had opened for real on a weekend in this building. Identical. Same path, I said. Now look at the dates. And here's where the floor fell out from under their story. I didn't have to argue it. I just had to point. The escalation on the real breach, I said. And I set my cursor on the timestamp so it sat 6 feet tall on the wall, was authorized at 2:11 in the morning. On a Saturday. Inside a 22-day window. I pulled up the second date beside it. My own. This is the day my access was revoked. This is the day it was fully deactivated. The breach escalation fired here. My cursor moved. In the middle. 11 days after my badge went red. 9 days before it was even technically possible for my credentials to have signed anything. I let that sit. You froze me out to make me look guilty, I said. You made me look guilty by taking away the one thing that could have committed the crime. My access was dead. A dead credential can't authorize an escalation. The very thing you did to frame me is the thing that proves I couldn't have done it. I looked at Kessler, because she was the one who needed a clean narrative and I was about to hand her one, just not the one she'd walked in with. The lockout isn't my guilt. It's my alibi. The CTO was looking at Whitlock now. So was Kessler. So were the two board members on the screen, leaning in. But somebody signed it, I said. That escalation didn't authorize itself. SVC data sync could reach for domain admin, but reaching requires a standing admin credential to approve the jump, a short list of God-level accounts. And in the 22 days I was locked out, only one of them was never throttled, never reviewed, never touched. Because the person who owns it uses it. Every day. Quietly, I moved my cursor one last time to the credential field on the real breach's authorization record. The name that had signed the door open. Grant Whitlock. 6 feet tall on the wall, in front of the board that came to bury me. Nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time. It was probably 4 seconds. In a room like that, 4 seconds is a geological age. The auditor did the thing that ended it. She didn't shout. She reached over, turned my laptop maybe 30 degrees, so the wall source, the credential line, faced down the table. Toward Whitlock. Made him look at his own name. Kessler spoke first. Very quiet. The quiet of a woman whose clean narrative just detonated in her hands. Grant. Explain the authorization. Watch a confident man meet the wall. It comes apart in stages. First, the reflex. That account is shared. He said it fast. Too fast. SVC Data Sync is a service account. Anyone with infrastructure access could have used it. That's not a person, that's a shared path. You can't put a name on a service account. Everyone in that room knows that's not how. It's not the service account, Grant. The auditor. Still standing. She reached into her own folder and put a second record up. She'd loaded it to the shared drive before the meeting, I found out later, because auditors plan for the man who says it's shared. The service account made the reach, but the reach was approved. The approval carries a multi-factor token, a person's token, a physical second factor that lives on one person's phone. She let it come up on the wall. The MIFA stamp. The device ID, the name on the device, this one. Yours, at 2:11 Saturday morning, your token approved SVC Data Sync's escalation. A shared account can't hold your MIFA. Whitlock's mouth opened, closed, his hands, which had been moving the whole meeting, gesturing, tapping, went flat on the table, palms down. Still, I have never seen a man go still like that. It was like watching a building decide, all at once, to stop being a building. He said. And that was all. Whatever came after it, he couldn't get to. The CTO tried to save it. Old instinct. Save the org. Save the man you promoted. This is one interpretation of a log, he said, gathering himself, reaching for the gray authority in his voice. Tokens can be spoofed. Timestamps drift. Before we let an accusation like this leave this room, I want an independent. You close the ticket, the auditor said. The CTO stopped. 6 weeks before the breach, she went on. And now she put my ticket up. My old risk ticket. SVC Data Sync. Medium, recommend scoping down the escalation. And the closure line, the won't fix. Business dependency. And the initials on the closure. This ticket flagged the exact account, the exact escalation, the exact path we just watched Miss Sorensen reproduce. It was closed against her recommendation. The closure is initialed. She didn't even say the name. She just let his own 3 letters sit on the wall next to won't fix. Those are your initials, aren't they? The CTO looked at the wall, at his own initials on the decision that had left the door open. He didn't say tokens can be spoofed again. He didn't say anything. He took his glasses off, and he stopped talking. And a man like that stopping talking is louder than any confession. Then it was legal's turn, and legal had brought a knife that turned in their own hand. The outside counsel, the one who'd slid the severance letter across a table at me 11 days ago, $95,000 if I'd sign my own guilt, She had the letter in her folder. I watched her realize what it was now. Not a shield, a live grenade. That letter had me accepting negligent configuration. In writing. If I'd signed it, Halcyon would have gone to the regulators holding a signed admission that its breach was one analyst negligence, while the real path led to a VP who'd approved the escalation and a CTO who'd closed the warning. The signed letter wouldn't have protected the company. It would have been the company certifying a lie to a federal regulator. It would have been the thing that sank them. She took the letter out. $95,000 and my name on a line. And she slid it back across the table toward me, unsigned, face down, like it was hot. "Miss Sorensen," she said, and her voice had changed completely. "You should not sign this. Please disregard the 5-day window. Please disregard the offer entirely." She meant, please don't ever produce this in front of a regulator. I understood her perfectly. I left the letter face down on the table between us, and I didn't touch it. And then, small and almost sad, the last one. Derek, he'd been sitting there the whole time with his legal pad, the new owner of my work, and I watched him get smaller with every reveal. And part of me, I'll admit it, part of me had wanted this. But when it came, it wasn't satisfying the way I'd imagined. It was just small. One of the board members on the screen, trying to get his footing back, asked a technical question. A reasonable one. "Mr. Pryor, you've inherited this portfolio. Walk us through the current state of the SVC DataSync account. Is the escalation still present? Has it been scoped? What's the remediation status?" Simple questions. The questions the person responsible for that account should answer in their sleep. Derek opened his mouth, and nothing came. He looked at his pad. He looked at Whitlock, who was still staring at his own flat hands and had nothing to give him. He looked at me, and for a second, I'll give him this, for a second he knew exactly what he was. A man handed a seat he couldn't fill, and a label he hadn't earned. I'd have to check," he said. That's not something I'd have to get back to you." "Still open," I wanted to say. "It's still open, Derek." Theo confirmed it 8 days ago. "You've owned it for 11 and you don't even know it's the door that ate the company." But I didn't say it. The silence said it. The golden boy shine went out right there at the table. Quietly. No drama. Just a light turning off in a room where everyone was already looking somewhere else. Kessler closed the review early. She didn't give a speech. She said the board would reconvene, that the demonstration and the authorization records would be entered into the incident record in full, that the external auditor's findings would supersede the internal draft. She said, looking at me, that my whistleblower assertion was noted and protected. And then she said the only thing that came close to an apology, which was, "Miss Sorensen, thank you for your thoroughness." Thoroughness. 4 years. A public naming in front of 60 people and 400 on a CC line. $95,000 dangled to make me sign my own execution. A daughter asking if we were moving, and the word I got was thoroughness. I took it. Sometimes the win is quiet, and the quiet is the win. I packed up my one machine. Whitlock didn't look at me. He was still at the table when I left, hands flat, a man doing the math on the rest of his life. The auditor caught me at the door and shook my hand and said, "That was the cleanest trace I've seen presented live. You should do this for a living." I laughed. I didn't know yet how right she was. I walked out past the desk where the visitor badge had beeped red on the way in. On the way out, nobody asked for it. I put it in the little return tray myself. Now let me tell you about 7 months later, because the story doesn't end in that room, and I don't think the good ones ever do. There's a window desk. It's mine. Small office, 2nd floor, above a bakery, so the whole place smells like bread by 9 in the morning. On the door there's a name, mine, and under it what I do now. Breach reproduction. I build companies a live copy of their own network, and I show them, on a shared screen, exactly how their door opens. before some stranger on a weekend shows them instead. Turns out there's a market for the woman who makes them watch it happen. The auditor sent me my first 3 clients. I've never had to advertise. I took the settlement money's refusal, and I took my name back, and it turned out those were the same act. Josie's tuition is paid a year ahead. The mortgage is current. There's a new badge on a lanyard by my door, and the first morning I clipped it on. It beeped green, and I stood in the little hallway over the bakery, and I noticed it. Green, such a small sound. I hadn't heard it in a long time. On Sundays I call Sol. He's 63, and pretends he doesn't wait for the call. Last Sunday, he asked how the consultancy was going, and I told him about a hospital chain that hugged me. Literally, the CISO hugged me. After I showed them a path just like SVC DataSync living in their own network, still open, and they closed it that same afternoon. Sol was quiet a second. Then he said the only thing he ever says that makes my throat tight. You made them watch. You told me to. Yeah, well. I could hear him smile down the line. Old men are occasionally right. The rest of it I only get in glimpses, the way you get news of people you no longer share a building with. Halcyon's regulatory filing, the one they had to submit, the one the auditor's findings shaped, lists SVC DataSync remediation as overdue. Still, even now, they fixed everything except the door. Whitlock is, in the careful language of a press note, no longer with the company. The CTO took early retirement, which is what they call it when a man is allowed to leave through a door that still has his initials on it. Derek Pryor moved to another firm. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him much of anything. And there's one more, because life has a sense of humor, and I'd be lying if I trimmed it out. 4 months into the new office, an email came in. From Grant Whitlock. Personal address. Subject line just my first name. He'd heard I did reproductions now. He was preparing his own defense. There were, he wrote, proceedings, and he wanted to retain me. He wanted me to build a replica and reproduce the path in a way that showed the authorization was ambiguous. Shared, not clearly his. He offered a number. It was a good number. It was, I noticed, almost exactly $95,000. I read it twice. I thought about the mug wrapped in newspaper and the badge that beeped red, and my daughter in the doorway at midnight asking, is it going to work? And I wrote back one line. I didn't gloat. I've watched people gloat and it makes them smaller, not bigger. I wrote, I only reproduce what actually happened. Then I closed the laptop and went downstairs and bought a loaf of bread that was still warm, and I walked home to my daughter, and that was the whole revenge. Not the room. Not his flat hands on the table. This, a warm loaf, and a paid tuition, and a green light in the morning. Here's what I know now that I didn't know the day my badge failed. The loud people run the meetings. The confident ones stand at the glass wall and tell you how it's going to go. But somewhere in every building, at 2 a.m, there's a quiet person reading the logs. Reading the fine print nobody else reads. Filing the ticket nobody wants. And you can freeze that person out. You can put their name on your worst day and dangle money to make them sign it. But the logs don't lie, and neither, in the end, does the woman who spent 4 years learning to read them. The quiet people read the logs. And sometimes, if you push them all the way to the kitchen table, they make you watch. If you've ever been the quiet one who saw it coming and got blamed anyway, I already know your story, and it deserves the room. Comment the city you're watching from. I really do want to see how far a frozen-out analyst's story can travel.